Good morning, Mr. President, members of Council. I'll just make my presentation. I'm pleased to share with you today just a very high-level summary of development activity data and some building permit data that we've been gathering as a department. And I think Mr. Lloyd said this earlier today, that the Planning and Zoning Department has a lot of data, and we do. We have a lot of data, and I promise you, big data does not necessarily mean big presentation. So I've resisted the urge to have a 50-slide presentation, and this is just a dozen slides, but they do contain a lot of information. Please feel free to ask me questions. There's a lot of data here to unpick, and also this is a preliminary analysis that could open the pathways for even further analysis down the line. So I just wanted to start with just a comment about jurisdiction. So the Planning and Zoning Department receives and processes applications for the unincorporated areas of Sussex County. But we gather building permit data on all municipalities, all 25 of them. And this map shows the 25 municipalities, and if you look at the list on the right, I've highlighted some of them in green because we actually perform building code services to those municipalities, highlighted in green, and we have a very good data exchange with all municipalities, but we provide additional services to some that we don't necessarily provide to others. Lewis, for example, undertake all their own planning and zoning functions, and their own permitting functions, and their own inspection functions. So it's important that I just note that as we go into that only 14 of them we perform building code inspections for. Big picture data. So this chart shows the development applications as they're submitted to the Planning and Zoning Office for Sussex County. And the orange line shows the conditional use applications as they're submitted by calendar year. The blue line shows the change of zone applications, and the amber line shows the major subdivision applications. And then in the table in the bottom, and I'm happy to print this and share this with you, and if anyone wants to obtain a copy of this, we're happy to share as well. The total number of lots that are proposed each year, this doesn't necessarily mean approved, are actually shown in the table, in the middle of the table at the bottom, and that's also displayed by calendar year. And you can see there's a definite pattern in the submittal rate of applications. And this largely reflects the housing market nationally. You can see during times of national higher activities in house prices and sales of homes, you can see that those years in particular are the years we saw the highest development activities. But you can see that outside those years, there's actually a baseline of applications. And essentially, it remains pretty much flat from year to year, although we did see a big boom in applications in 2022, particularly in conditional uses. So,
Mr. Whitehouse, can you go back to that slide, please?
Oh, sure, yep.
Two question clarification. The conditional use category listed here, is that conditional use for all conditional use requests or residential development requests? That's
correct. So this is conditional uses for everything. So it could be a landscaping business, for example. This is just total applications submitted to the offices. And thank you for asking that. It's an important point.
Second clarification, in 2017, under major subdivision lots proposed, you see a large jump from 651 to 6,985. Can you explain what we started doing in 2017?
So basically, we saw a wave. There was a code change in 2017 that actually changed the drainage requirements, and so the county saw a surge in applications, particularly for larger cluster subdivision applications, particularly to get ahead of that. So if you were submitted in advance of that ordinance coming into effect for drainage requirements, you were effectively grandfathered, and we did begin to see a surge in applications ahead of potential ordinances. And likewise, there were other ordinances that were being considered in 2018, and the department saw an increase in larger, more complex cluster subdivision applications. So, thank you. So, moving from applications, another metric to monitor growth is building permits. And we have a great deal of GIS, that's Geographic Information System data, on building permits. And so this map shows, in relative to the 2020 state spending strategies, and I say 2020 because these strategies are imminently about to be updated this year. So all of the data in this presentation might be rendered obsolete in just a few months because these areas are highly likely to change because they're based on development activity and infrastructure development as it existed in 2020. But what we've done is we've plotted all the building permits for the dwellings. So we took over 775,000 data points and we condensed it down to just dwellings. But this is all dwellings. This is manufactured homes, this is accessory dwelling units, this is townhouses, this is duplex apartments, this is single-family dwellings, this is multifamily. And so what we did, we plotted all of them county-wide, and this includes all the municipalities, and it totals 22,358 building permits across a 5-year period. We actually did just over a 5-year period, so this is January 1st, 2020, through to January 22nd of this year. And so this data is actually more up-to-date than the data the State Planning Office currently has, because they're reliant on our data questionnaires and our data returns that we send every year, so they haven't quite seen our 2024 data. So that's a lot of data to look at. So I broke it down by year. So this is the 2020 data by calendar year. And you can see that there is a clear east-west distribution, but you can see that you can see those clusters of developments. For example, you can see Hawthorne on Route 9 east of Georgetown. You can see Americana Bayside all the way down at 54. You can see those clusters of building permits being issued for dwellings. Also, if you look at, is it Heritage Shores outside Bridgeville, you can see those clusters outside Bridgeville. So this is 2020, where we had nearly 4,500 building permits. And then if you jump to 2021, we had 4,985,000 building permits. Again, you can see that clear east-west split. And then if you jump to 2022, you can see 4,300 building permits, again with that same east-west split. And then jumping to 2023, we had 4,000 building permits. So you can see that there's variance every year in the number of building permits that are issued. I will, at the end of the presentation, speak to some of the limitations of this data, because building permits issues does not necessarily mean building permits built and dwellings completed. There are many manufactured home building permits that get issued but not built. So, and then this is just this year, the 220 building permits for dwellings that we've processed this year. And you can see that, again, you can see that they're quite dispersed across the county. So looking at that data relative to the state spending strategies, we actually averaged the data out and looked at how many building permits were being issued in levels 1, 2, 3 and 4 over a 5-year period, and you can see an average. Just looking at the data mathematically, it's more or less the same every year. You see there's slight dips from year to year, but what we didn't see was a huge jump up or down in any one particular year, so the averages remain kind of flat, really. If you look collectively, if you look at levels 1, 2 and 3, you can see the majority of building permits county-wide are being issued in those areas, but approximately 28%, depending on how you average it, is being issued in level 4. So,
Jamie.
Yep.
So, looking at the distribution, so it looks like I'm due for cataract surgery in a couple of weeks, so bear with me. But 28%, and Jane's going tomorrow. So level 4, 28%. On the 5-year average?
Correct.
So do you have a breakdown of what percentage of the property in Sussex County is level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4?
Not in this presentation. It's easily capable of calculating it.
I mean, I'm going to surmise that the vast majority of it is level 4.
It is, and that leads me to my next slide. So it's a very good question that kind of tees up this slide.
So a quarter of the units are being built in the by far the largest
correct.
percentage of land.
A quarter county-wide are being built in level 4. But what I wanted to draw attention to is that data incorporates all the areas that are municipalities. So we split the data, going back to those original 22,000 building permits. I highlighted all the building permits that are being issued or have been issued in municipalities. And that's nearly 6,000. That's 26.2% of all the data is actually inside municipalities. And I thought that's quite significant, really, because that skews the data a little bit. And that goes directly to your point, Councillman Riley, about in the county's jurisdiction, where I can certainly get you that number. How many acres of lands that are in the county's jurisdiction are in 1, 2, 3? I can certainly get you that. It's just not in this presentation.
Right. I mean, a lot of the pushback I get from people is, like down on Route 54, all the development down there, but Selbyville's annexed in halfway to Fenwick Island. I mean, Plantation Lakes is, I get a lot of pushback with that, but that's all Millsboro.
Correct.
Heritage Shores, that's another one that. So, again, not to beat a dead horse, but the topic of moratorium would be completely ineffective in my point of view, because the towns would not be, unless they followed suit simultaneously, the building would continue within towns, and by far, I think some of the biggest impacts we see are developments that are close to that. But that's according to our master plan, right? That's what we want, right?
Correct.
We want development up close to the town centers where there are services and and infrastructure to support it, so.
That's absolutely correct, and that's what this chart shows, is that any moratorium would not affect 26% of the dwelling permits that are being issued in the county over the last 5 years, because they're not in the county's jurisdiction. So.
Mr. Whitehouse, can you go back a slide to the table?
Yep.
The levels 1 and 2, which predominantly 1, 2, and 3 are in or just around the municipalities.
Right.
Does that include municipal building permits, or is that only in the unincorporated county?
So this data incorporates all the building permits that are being issued. So it's I do seek to refine it in a later chart, and I can get to that in just a moment.
Thank you.
So jumping forward, and I promise to do this in under a dozen slides. Sorry,
Does that include decks, fences, sheds?
Good question. The answer is no. So of the 775,000 data points that we had, we filtered everything out that was not a dwelling. So decks, solar panels, swimming pools, all of that is removed. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see the map. It would just be a sea of dots. Of that data, so having removed the permits that are in municipalities, we tried to go a step further, and this is very preliminary. We have in our database, we have geographic information about all the subdivisions that exist in Sussex County. And we also have all the cluster subdivisions, and we know when they were created by year. So what we wanted to do is just compare where those building permits were being issued relative to the modern cluster subdivisions, the post-2004 ones. And if you look at the data, you can see that, by and large, the majority of new dwellings that have been constructed in the last 5 years, almost the vast majority of that is being built in modern cluster subdivisions. But also, there's other. If you look at the permits, it's about 51% of the overall building permits that are being issued can be attributed to other sources, including multifamily. So for example, the Governor's development outside of Lewis is not shown on this map, because that is a single-family detached condominium, and it's also townhouses, and it's multifamily. So it wouldn't be captured in this data. So a lot of the building permits that are being issued are not going through the cluster option per se. They're going through other design options. And certainly that's capable of being measured, and that's being capable of being counted. It's just that this data did not go that far. But of the modern cluster subdivisions for which we have data and which we analyse, I did compare what those green triangles, I did compare their levels 1, 2, and 3, and 4 locations. And actually, it's a little bit different to the county-wide average. If you look at our cluster subdivisions, we're actually seeing a little bit more in level 1. We're seeing a little bit less in level 2, and a little bit more in level 3, but a little bit more in level 4 is what this shows. And if you look underneath, they're the exact numbers that have been issued in levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 of those green triangles. So it was an interesting metric to have. It's just that this is very high level, and we didn't want to get too far into the weeds. There's all sorts of analyses that we can perform. And with that, I'll pause for any questions, but I did want to just throw out some explanation of the data gathering methodology. There are limits to this data for anyone who wishes to quote this data or use this data. This data is based on building permit issuance, so it doesn't necessarily guarantee that dwelling was completed or if that dwelling was even started. This is just what we issued. And then 2, some of the building permits in the data can be for multiple units. And it would take a lot more time than we've had to prepare this to actually isolate that and say that these are the dwellings. By and large, within the data, it is usually the approach in the county that someone would pull one building permit for just one dwelling. But there are examples like multifamily where you have a developer pulling one building permit for 26 units as apartments inside a big building. So for that, I have to throw some caveats out there and some limitations on the data that the numbers presented do not necessarily reflect total dwellings. So.
Can you get back one slide? I just wanted to write down the level 4 is 28%.
We can get you a copy of this.
I just want it for my next question.
You said there was more analysis. This might seem crazy. Could you get this breakdown in the form of zip codes?
If you can think of it with GIS, it can be done, yes.
Right.
So
Okay.
you'd want to see dwellings permitted by zip code.
Yeah, and probably a little more. But this is definitely this is great. This is gold. This is what I was kind of alluding to needing. And we're going to need to share this with said working group so that they have something to work off of to make what I'm going to consider a recommendation at the end of it. But it has to be rooted in this. So.
Thank you. I will say this, the state spending strategies numbers will very, very soon be rendered obsolete. because the state is imminently about to update its state spending strategies, and I think Mr. Edgell's coming on down to explain that. And to Mr. Lawson's point that he made earlier, because of new infrastructure growth across the county during the last 5 years, there are obvious locations like Cool Springs, for example, where the state spending strategies numbers, if the state uses the same methodology that it uses previously, those numbers will come up in those areas where there's new hospitals, for example.
Right.
That's assuming the state uses the same methodology as last time around, though, and that's one of the questions. So.
Can you go back a couple more slides to the, I try not to.
The big one with all
That's the strategy level.
That one.
Okay.
Yep.
So the yellow is mainly down Selbyville, Fenwick area. What's funny is that doesn't really show up on the GIS map that you can get right online.
But my expectation, Councilman McCarron, is that in areas where we've seen new infrastructure, there will be more amber and there will be more orange, because anything that, like a new hospital, carries with it a 5-mile radius, and it pulls up the points of all those data points across a 5-mile radius. So the two new hospitals, we actually prepared a map on this recently. There's a new medical facility on Healthy Way off Lexus Lane off 24, and there's a new facility in the Cool Springs area, and both of them will attract 5-mile circles around them, and they will pull up all the numbers in those 5-mile radiuses. So.
Great.
I just want to highlight a point I made earlier. Look at all the white on the map. That's level 4. I don't even want to venture to guess, but I guarantee you it's over 50%, right?
Oh, easily.
So it's probably closer to 70%. So we're in this catch-22 of where the majority of the area of land in this county is in the area in which the spending is not following. So how do we fix that catch-22?
So you've got a development, if it's just coming before planning and zoning and you're having a hearing, the state of Delaware is describing the characteristics of level 4 as rural in nature, open space, natural area, agricultural activities, historic crossroads or points of trade, and rich cultural heritage. This applicant's coming before planning and zoning. You understand what the state of Delaware describes this as, and what tools do you have in supporting what the state of Delaware is saying?
So the comprehensive plan is the ultimate tool for deciding land use. And I think the state, I can't speak for the state of Delaware, but the state of Delaware did say last night at a 5 Points meeting, the state spending strategies are not a land use tool per se. They are a fiscal management and sustainability tool. They are very, very useful tools, but it is the comp plan that is the land use tool.
So we would describe it as low density.
Oh, the definition of what level 4 is?
But
yes.
I mean, on our map, it would be low density. I guess right now, in our minds, 2 houses per acre is low density in AR1.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Whitehouse, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's gold, Jamie. I'm going to digest that if you can email it to me.
We'll get you printed copies today.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Poff, Director of Economic Development.